The Game Gear is a system that not a lot of people talk about, especially when it comes to RPGs, but actually it does have some RPGs that are worth playing even now. There's a good mix of tactical RPGs, traditional JRPGs, and action. So let's start with Moldorian. Moldorian Hikari to Yami no Sister is basically the definition of a hidden gem, especially for English-speaking RPG fans. We never got this game in English until it was fan-translated, but in Japan, this game is thought of as a hidden masterpiece. One of the bigger reasons for this is the soundtrack. This is one of the few handheld RPGs with a big name attached to it, and Hitoshi Sakimoto, who you might know as one of the composers for Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics, various Vanillaware games like Muramasa Odin Sphere, and even Valkyria Chronicles. It has an interesting combat system in which you need to stay on your toes because your enemy will attack even if you don't. You attack by holding a directional button and selecting the enemy both with regular attacks and magic. It even has some more modern ideas in it, like the ability to save anywhere or bulk buy items, which really wasn't a thing back in those days, and even has a decent story on top of that. I would definitely recommend this for fans of simpler RPGs like the early Dragon Quests and Final Fantasies. Royal Stone is a surprisingly competent tactical RPG that is on the Game Gear. The idea for this one is that you follow the story of the knight Eva, who has been accused of betraying her country and her father, maybe even striking down her own soldiers. You actively play as her companion Kokat, while you're walking around in towns, and this makes it a bit of a different style of strategy RPG than something like Final Fantasy Tactics, a bit more towards something like Shining Force, which I personally love. The added layer of exploration, talking to townsfolk, is a nice break from the tactical battles, and those actually have a good amount of strategy to them. The idea is that each character is assigned an element, and that element is good against another element, but the enemies' identities are hidden at the start of the battle, only discovered when you either engage in combat or use the scan skill on them one at a time. This is easily one of the better handheld tactical RPG experiences. I definitely recommend you check it out if you're interested in the Game Gear library. Defenders of Oasis is an interesting one for a couple of different reasons. The most obvious is that it leans into Arab culture quite a bit, which isn't something that you often get in RPGs. It also has some different mechanics that you might not expect. For example, you eventually get a genie in your party who doesn't level in a traditional way like the rest of the characters. Instead, there are specific items that you purchase and then give to the genie in order to raise its stats. So that makes you decide between getting new weapons and armor upgrades for your characters or getting higher stats on your magic user. Defenders of Oasis tells the story of a lazy prince whose kingdom is conquered. Now he has to rise up and take it back. So fans of Empire versus Rebellion stories will definitely enjoy this game, even if it is a bit simplistic. It's a decent RPG that plays, again, a bit like Dragon Quest, so if you enjoyed that style, this is a good one to give a shot. Shining Force actually had multiple different games for the Game Gear in the various Shining Force Gaiden games, and these take a lot of what you love from Shining Force and condense that into a shorter and more manageable form for handheld. And these games were good enough that eventually Camelot decided to do remakes of them and put them out into a single compilation called Shining Force CD, which takes two of the scenarios, puts them into one game with two extra scenarios added to that. Now, you could make the argument that this kind of makes the Game Gear version a bit pointless, since you could just play the Sega CD version, but unfortunately, Sega didn't add Shining Force Final Conflict to Shining Force CD, which means this is currently the only way to play it on the Game Gear, and it actually contains explanations for a lot of important things if you're a Shining Force fan, including what happens between Shining Force 1 and 2. So, if nothing else, play Shining Force CD, and then Shining Force Final Conflict on the Game Gear, because they're all really great tactical RPGs. Sylvan Tale is a game that you could argue for not necessarily being an RPG, but even if you call it action-adventure instead of action RPG, it's still a fun game that's worth trying out. This one plays similarly to old-school top-down Zelda. It also has some music from Hitoshi Sakimoto and Saori Kobayashi of Panzer Dragoon Saga fame. Sylvan Tale is a bit short, running at around 4 to 6 hours, but for fans of Zelda-style games, it's a pretty fun one. It has a cool mechanic where you transform into different things in order to solve puzzles, including a mole, a bird, or a merman. It also opens up a decent amount in the middle of the game, so you can spend your time running around and exploring. Sylvan Tale is a fun game, so I definitely recommend you give it a look if you're into old school Zelda. And Crystal Warriors is the last game on the list. It brings us back to the tactical RPG style of game. And this is another one that utilizes elemental archetypes, and if you don't pay attention to those, you will get destroyed. There's also a system of taming and summoning monsters that you find. It allows you to pull that monster during battles if you happen to need a specific elemental against whatever you're fighting at the time. But monsters aren't hugely powerful, so you have to be careful about you use them, or you'll just get blown up. And actually, Royal Stone is the sequel to Crystal Warriors, so you can see a lot of similar ideas here that were later refined in Royal Stone. So it's a decently fun tactical RPG, so if you like this style, it's worth at least taking a look, and definitely play Royal Stone. So there you go, 6 different underrated RPGs for the Game Gear, showing that the Game Gear actually has some decent RPGs on it, maybe more than you would expect. It's similar to the Game Boy in that way. Some of them might be a bit shorter than the games on console, but a decent amount of them are still worth playing. So if you have any other RPGs that you think should be highlighted, let me know what those are. Feel free to tell me about them in the comments. And for more videos about RPGs of all kinds, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.